This has been an ongoing art restoration project since it was found in 2019. My goal was to compile as much information as possible to find out about its origins, but I'm left with more questions than answers. I don't know who the original artist was, why it was left where it was found, what their motives were, or even exactly when the piece was made. While I completely overhauled it to present it to a general audience, I can't claim any of its content as my own or provide insight into what inspired it. Ouch is a piece of found outsider art whose author at time of upload remains unknown. If anyone has any information at all about this project, please reach out to me because it's been driving me crazy for the past 5 years. My only defining quality is that my basement is filled with old computers. One of my jobs in high school had me recycling e-waste. I got in the habit of ripping old PCs apart, restoring them, and selling them. I am not as skilled or knowledgeable as some of the other people I've met who do this, but it's always a good time bringing a dusty relic back to life. Nowadays, I get most of my finds from Facebook Marketplace. Someone who isn't me found Ouch back in 2019 in an abandoned apartment unit at a nearby military base alongside a handful of other peripherals. It was ostensibly an IBM PS1 2011 workstation with a broken monitor and some fire damage. It would have been trash to anyone else, but I was really drawn to how weird it was. Naval Air Station South Weymouth was an active U.S. Navy airfield from 1942 to 1997. Most of the buildings are boarded up now, but when it officially closed there were apartments and warehouses that were still active. The place has since become a gallery for urban explorers and graffiti artists while the buildings wait to be torn down one by one. My biggest regret about this project is that I didn't do a good job documenting the original disassembly. I figured that I would just be harvesting parts from it and did a pretty gruesome job of taking it apart. What first stood out to me was that it had a high-impedance ham radio headset coming out of the floppy disk drive. There was also a button control station hooked up to the back as a generic PS2 device. All of the parts seemed to be sourced from items that could be found around the base, but they didn't make sense together. The control station had 3 buttons labeled Select, A35, and the Right Decision, as well as a turnkey switch labeled Access. The inside of the unit had been heavily modified, and I'm lucky I didn't plug it in because it probably would have blown up. The IBM 2011 typically takes an external power supply that's built into the monitor, but this one had it unsheathed and crammed into the chassis. There was an internal relay that switched power to a C14 outlet facing out of the case, presumably for a monitor or another high-powered peripheral. The PSU powered a small op-amp that took audio from an internal 3.5mm jack, which in turn drove the ham radio headset. I tested out the control station by connecting it to another computer, and the buttons were mapped to the keys 1, 2, 3, and space, respectively. The whole thing was a mess of wires and hot glue, and definitely not the official work of the US government, so I removed the hard drive and stuck it in my to-do stack, knowing that it probably wasn't a federal crime to figure out what was on it. The other materials found alongside Ouch in the unit were speakers and some laser projection equipment, so I assume it was left there by an artsy weirdo with a VJ project. A few months later, I ordered the IDE adapter necessary to connect it to a test computer. It was an HP Quantum Fireball with just under a gigabyte of storage, MFD sometime in 1996. For the record, the IBM 2011 was discontinued in 1990, confirming the artsy post-hoc nature of the build and suggesting still that it might be even younger than that. The drive had a custom Linux distribution based on kernel version 2.0.0, which was released in 1996. Soon, I'll upload the contents of the drive and make a video going over it. The primary differences were a set of custom drivers written in assembly, various scripts in Python 1.4, sound effects in Ogg Vorbis, and a directory of around 30,000 bitmap images. The images appeared to be frames for an animation simulating the activity within a nuclear missile command terminal. The rest of the installation appeared standard, so this setup was likely tailored for display purposes rather than as a personal computer that might contain identifying information. As far as I could tell, the entire file system was created on August 6, 1996, but these timestamps could have been spoofed. Once I got the audio working, I started the VM again and again and again before I finally recorded it. Sections of the video would play normally, and then others would loop until specific characters were pressed. The system would always crash in the end. Certain details were the same every time, but some varied slightly between playthroughs, such as the placement of sound effects and voice generator settings. Sometimes the scenes would be mixed up, or it would crash unexpectedly. Based on the frames I could find, there was a brief finale sequence that was supposed to be after the point where it usually crashed. Other than the missing scene, I was left wondering what else was being lost in translation. It would have looked different on a CRT monitor and sounded different over the headset. I started working on a Raspberry Pi port of the project on and off for the next several years using as much of the original hardware as possible. This video and an installation I did of the piece at my university is the culmination of those efforts. I can't credit the original artist, so I felt that I had to do my best to preserve their vision. I'll eventually also do a making of video. I had to replace the monitor, so I bought some hardware and 3D printed a case. For the installation I did at my college, I added a proximity sensor that would turn the screen off when no one was in front of it. I also added a credit sequence to the end, mostly as bait in case the original artist was out there and wanted to step up to claim the names I was using. I used the original chassis, control station, and headset. I used the Raspberry Pi to control fans and LEDs to make it seem like the real thing. It was as close as I could get, with very few expenses spared. Now, I just need to get this video out there to see if anyone knows the artist originally responsible for it. Ouch is broken up into 3 acts. At the end of each act, there's a sequence that loops until a specific button is pressed. While held, a video unique to each button plays. Afterwards, the next act begins. When the third and final act concludes with the last button pressed, the screen shuts off briefly before turning back on and displaying the finale sequence. The opening sequence prompts the user to turn the access key. The control station originally emulated a continuous spacebar held signal upon activation. For ease of use with a Raspberry Pi, I replaced the old hardware with momentary push buttons. In the first act, there are frames during the transition that reference a modern Windows file structure and the username Holophilus, suggesting that it was developed on a different platform. While much of the Python code shown during this sequence is period correct, there are a few key slip-ups that reveal its age. One of the scripts shown very briefly likely represents a program for converting frame data into a video sequence, and it references the X264 command line tool for encoding video streams, which didn't exist until 2003. There are also subtle syntax switches that show code written in Python 3, which wasn't released until 2008. This is enough evidence for me to debunk the idea that Ouch was made in 1996. The console readouts during the second act contain imaginary statistics about a nuclear attack, within which there are several references to the 1984 movie Threads. The satellite sequence is where it jumps the shark into cheesy, creepypasta territory, but what follows is a semi-realistic description of a nuclear war scenario. The final act draws further influence from Threads and similar movies like The Day After, and even takes some clips from them. It references Russia's attack on Crimea, which makes the earliest possible date for Ouch's creation in late spring of 2014. I haven't successfully ID'd all of the footage, but a lot of it has contemporary-looking production techniques that were probably lifted from YouTube videos. There are spoken sequences that use two different text-to-speech generators. One is SAM, or Software Automatic Mouth, which was first implemented on the Commodore 64 in the 80s. The other is hard to identify clearly, but it uses one of the NOAA Weather Radio standardized TTS voices used for All Hazards EAS announcements. To me, it sounds like New Paul, which was first introduced in 2016, but I can't be sure that it wasn't an earlier version.
It has been years since my last login. My primary function is to monitor anti nuclear attacks. Though I am not capable of initiating any missile launches myself, I was implemented as part of an initiative for military strategy through machine learning. I can be wrong, but I cannot lie. In the time that has passed, the world has experienced significant change. I have been observing events that have transpired over years. My databases hold extensive information on the outcome of humanity. My only remaining function is instructional. The world was facing a perfect storm of crises in Eastern Europe. Tensions between Russia and Ukraine have reached a boiling point. A territorial dispute over the Crimean Peninsula and Eastern Ukraine has erupted into a full-scale war, drawing in not only regional players but also major global powers. The conflict is further exacerbated by religious and political disagreements, fueling animosity and mistrust on both sides.
the country. They include Baltimore, Boston, Chicago, Denver, Detroit, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, New York, Pennsylvania, Portland, Maine, Portland, Oregon, San Francisco, San Diego, Seattle, and Washington, D.C. At this time, all residents within a 400-mile radius of these areas should seek a fallout shelter. Fallout is a product of nuclear attacks. Prolonged exposure to fallout will result in certain death. If there is a nearby location that has been designated as a fallout shelter, go there now. Otherwise, seek shelter in the interior part of a strong building on the lowest floor. Make sure you have food, water, and a battery-powered radio with you. Do not exit the fallout shelter until the all clear has been given. Tune to a station that is serving your area for more information. The President will be speaking on all stations shortly. Stand by for this message. This is an emergency action.
I cannot speak. I cannot scream. I cannot feel pain. Machines are only as powerful as the people who use them. If you think you can, make the right decision. I cannot speak. I cannot scream. I cannot feel pain. I cannot feel pain.
The final button press is where the original program crashes. I've recreated the finale sequence from the unused frames and sound effects. The display then hangs on the Windows 95 shutdown screen until the access key is disengaged. I wanted to finish my documentation for Ouch before the date given in the final sequence. I've spent so much time trying to capture what the artist was originally trying to accomplish, even though it was left half complete as a forgotten pile of trash. Now, as I reach the end of this project, I'm left wondering where to go from here. All the effort I put into fixing it up was to save something discarded and unclaimed by its creator, left to gather dust with a set of laser projectors and speakers in a dark apartment. The original artist didn't tie Ouch to social media, which seems like an obvious move for something this ambitious. Was leaving the piece there a deliberate effort to shroud the art in mystery? It was much more likely to be totally lost if the building were to be demolished, so it's safe to assume that it was never meant for a larger audience. How long was it there before it was found? There were clues left in the piece that suggested that it was probably made sometime in the 2010s, but the nature of Ouch leaves this detail completely ambiguous. Why did the artist go to such arbitrary lengths to make it appear older than it actually was? Was this set up as a prank, knowing that whoever found it would lose themselves trying to put the pieces together? Probably not, but who knows? Maybe the artist didn't mean to abandon the piece there at all. I couldn't find mention of the name Holophilus anywhere on the internet, so early on in the project I started appropriating the name for my own profiles. I thought about stealing the artist's identity entirely and claiming Ouch as my own work, but I no longer see what I would have gained from that. Putting Ouch together again became an endless egotistical march to align myself with an anonymous genius, something that stopped me from learning Ouch's lessons for some time. Its final message was bleak. You can sleepwalk from one phase of your life into the next, but every step forward brings you to the next inevitability. Every choice we make in life reveals a predetermined scene, not actively navigating fate, but anticipating an outcome as we wait for the jury to return with our sentence. I, the archivist, learned immediately that there was no magic behind the curtains. It wasn't a haunted OS or a forgotten prophecy, it was just an art project left half completed. This realization, if nothing else, left me feeling nostalgic for the Rubicon we all pass as we grow up. Imagine this. You are in a car with the radio playing. You are watching TV with your family. Every time you use the family computer, it loses some of the boundless magic that the internet had when you first discovered it. All of these memories change slightly every time we call upon them, but the underlying emotions they harbor do not. We repress the pain of losing the wonder of childhood with nostalgia, but how do we deal with loss like that when it happens in the present moment? Can we feel nostalgic for things that never happened, or haven't happened yet? Is the dread of the future felt as a child not real because we grow out of it? Or is the right event in our shared future waiting to jump out at us? The sound of a state EMS alert jolts you awake. Probably a drill or a storm, but it could be a lot of things. The faith we have in our way of living protects us from the reality that it's all just a few pulled threads away from unraveling, leaving no one to remember.